All right, so I thought I'd just start with the face of the pedals and how you can adjust those. There are two 4mm screws here, and we just take them loose. Just regular screws, nothing to really see there. And as we pull this off, we can see that the pedal pad itself is a nice aluminum bit. It's got some nice finish on it. It's milled out for the screw holes. It's also milled out on the back for saving weight off your race car. And you also see there's 3 screw holes in the top of this lever and 3 in the bottom. And that's so you can adjust the face of the pedal, 1/2 inch right or 1/2 inch left. And you can also go up about 3/4 of an inch based on the holes for the height adjustment. And if you need any more height than that, again, like I said before in the overview, you just use some 80/20 profile to raise or lower the heel plate position. All right, so not much to see there. I just wanted to show you guys what was behind there. Go ahead and tighten it back up. And again, the machining on these is really nice, as you might imagine, for race car pedals. Everything's nice and tight. And I did want to show you, look over here, there's Phillips screws in this particular pedal. And the reason they're there is, I just want to show you this real quick. You can see the brake pedal lever is much more forward than the natural position of the throttle. And that's because in real racing cars where you'll have a different bias on your brakes down here, this pedal is going to travel further than it will on my sim rig when I set it up with a stiff pedal, or even with a GT pedal. It just doesn't go that far. And for me to do heel and toe braking, I need this pad to be further out. In a real car, this pedal would probably go back as far to get even with the throttle over here, and then you could do your blipping without any problem because your brake pedal's this far back. But to get my pedal that far back, I would have to have some very, very loose bumpers on the slave cylinder, which I'll show you about that in a minute. So that's why I have an extension up here. It's about 2 inches. It did come with the kit, and the screws to mount it came with the kit from Emery. And that's, again, why you're seeing that long pedal face kick out there. All right, so let's talk about the adjustments over here on this balance bar. All right, so this balance bar has actually the 2 shafts that push the pistons in these master cylinders back here are mounted by some cam barrels in here that actually are threaded, and this threaded bar passes through those. And that's how you adjust the bias of the brakes if you had this set in a car. Now we have, of course, a closed loop here on both of these master cylinders, so we don't want anything but a 50/50 bias on our brakes. Now you should not have to adjust this. It comes from Emery already adjusted, and you shouldn't have to mess with it. But if something should happen where it gets out of adjustment and you start pushing fluid from one reservoir to the other because somehow this has gotten out of adjustment and one of these pistons is being pushed before the other, then this is how you would adjust it back. You take a 9/16 on this barrel nut down here, pop that loose, and we'll pull the barrel nut off. Just so you can see it. And that's what it looks like. It's got threads, of course, all the way down it. And what I would do is just turn the threaded shaft itself while I have it loose and just turn it. I'm not turning it very far loose because I have it 50/50 now. I don't want to mess with it. Don't want to mess it up and then have to get it fixed again. And what I would do is I would adjust it to where when I start to move the brake pedal, I look straight down at these 2 shafts that connect to the pistons inside the master cylinders and make sure when that brake pedal moves, as soon as it starts to move, both of those shafts move also. And if I see them both move, as soon as I start to move this, then I know I got a 50/50 bias on here and I'm done. Just simply tighten my barrel nut back up, snug it up with that 9/16. And that's all there is to it. And like I said, this should not happen. It should stay 50/50. But if anything did happen, I just want to show you guys how to do that. All right, now let's talk about the throttle pedal and how it can adjust. Well, the adjustments here are springs. And they look like this. And you get 2 of them with the kit that Emery gives you. And this was a thinner one that was in originally. And I like a little bit heavier feel on my throttle pedal. So I went with a thicker one that he actually includes in the kit. And it's easy enough to change. All it is a 5/16 wrench. And you just loosen the nut. Once that comes off, all this comes off. There's a little spring washer in here. Be careful you don't lose that. And of course you would also detach the linkage over here because you don't want that to come off when you pull this assembly off. Because the lever assembly all comes as one piece, comes off, and then the spring will come off with it. And as it comes off, you can push the lever forward and the spring won't pop out on you. It just releases softly and you can take it off. Then you'll put this one back in, and there's some stops that you can't see, little grooves down in here, behind the pedal under here, and also behind this stop over here, where the spring pieces here will rest. And then you shove everything back on, put your washers back on and your nut, tighten everything down, and you've changed your spring. And you can actually get other springs for this also. When you tighten it up, you don't have to torque the heck out of it. Just tighten up good and snug, and you should be good to go. Now there's two other adjustments on this pedal, and you can see here, it's easy to see that one. This is a stop, and there's a set screw in here that you use to change how far the travel of the pedal goes. And it's a 7/16 nut on there with a 1/8 inch hex set screw. All you gotta do is loosen that nut. Once it's loose, you can spin it up or spin it down depending on which direction you want to go. Tighten your set screw back down, and while you're holding it, just snug it back up, and you're done. And that top stop actually changes how far back the pedal will go. There's a plate back here that the pedal actually, that stop actually hits. So that changes how far the pedal throw will go. So that's pedal throw adjustment as far as going this way. But there's also another stop in here you can see from the front. This stop here, and that simply adjusts the pedal how far it returns. So you want to turn it further forward, you can actually just loosen this up and change that set screw, and that'll change how far forward it goes. And really that's all there is adjustments on these things as far as the pedals, the throttle pedal goes. Now the clutch is similar in that it has a set screw too. So let me see if you can see that right there. So that's our set screw, but this is a set screw for how far the travel pedal goes back that way. It does not adjust. There's no stop for the return because on the back of this, you can see there's a nylon safety nut on that threaded shaft that's inside the spring here, and that's what stops how far it comes forward. And you probably never would adjust that. Now the spring itself on this clutch pedal, of course, you can replace this spring with something lighter or harder or stronger so that you have a heavier feel or a lighter feel in the clutch. You can also preset, change the pre-torquing of the preset on this for the spring, and you can change that so it's either harder or softer just using the same spring. So you can actually adjust it without having to worry about it changing a spring. And that's about it for the adjustments on the pedals. Now let's get to the adjustment that were really fun part. And really this is not as involved as it looks at first. It's a pretty simple thing, and we're going to look at it right now. It's 2 1/2-inch nuts that are actually holding everything onto the shaft of the slave cylinder, and that's a pull type slave cylinder again that will pull everything that way. And you'll see that in the video. All you do is put 1 1/2-inch wrench on there and take the other one and just break that locking top nut loose. And once you've done that, spin it off. And if you see here, I can finger turn this nut right now. And what that is I just tighten it up with my fingers so that there's no slop in it. If it's too loose and they're jiggling around, I don't want that, of course. So we'll just snug it back up. Now you can also keep tightening this nut, and that will change the preload on here, on these dampeners, which will change the way the pedal feels. Instead of just putting the dampeners on, you can actually preload them also, which changes past just putting dampeners on, which is kind of neat, so you can actually fine tune, if you want to, the feel of it. And once it's locked down, you just put your nut back on. Now right now this is like an F1 pedal because these red durometers or red bumpers are very, very tough durometer, very stiff. If I want to change that, let's say to a GT, then I would just spin off the remaining 1/2-inch nut, take that stack off. Now it's just a bunch of, leave that washer on. This is just a bunch of plastic washers. And they're kind of hard so they don't compress or anything. And that comes with the kit, of course. And let's say I wanted to go with a GT pedal, then I would take a couple of these dampers. And then there you go. They have India written on them, but I'm not sure what the other marking is for. Maybe a durometer, I'm not sure. But you can actually get others than just these two, have different durometers, so you can actually play with how your pedal feels. And what I do is just take these and put one on first, then I'd put a washer on, because you're supposed to have a washer in between them. Sometimes I forget that. But that just, Emery told me that you need a washer in between them because it saves the wear and tear on the actual durometer. So once you get a washer in between that one, put your other one on. And by the way, I wanted to point out real quick, this is a smooth bore on this shaft. Very smooth until the threaded, just the end part is threaded, and I'm pointing it out for a reason. Once you get these durometers back on, and I'll put another washer on here. But if you can see here, there's still some smooth part of that shaft showing, which means my nut's not going to be able to go all the way up against this washer, and everything will be just hanging loose and jiggly. So what I would do is just pull one of these nylon washers, put it on, and then when I put the washer on, I got nothing but thread showing, and that's what I want. So then I can put my 1/2" nut back on, the big fat one. These are actually different size. One's thinner than the other, so it lets you know which one's the locking one. And I can get it finger tight like this, so it's not moving around anymore. Or I can continue to preload these things wherever I wanted to change the feel of the pedal. So that's kind of neat that we don't just put durometers on, but we can also do the preload on it also. But typically I'll just snug it up with my fingers so I can just barely move it with my fingers and leave it from there. And just go ahead and spin that thin 1/2" back on. Take my wrenches, hold the back one, and snug up the top one. And that's all there is to it. And again, you don't have to really torque that hard to make that snug up and stay tight. And now I've got a GT pedal on here, which I can actually, with my hands, compress a little bit. All right, so that's going to be a pedal that has more travel to it once I put it on there. And that's about it for the adjustments. Not a lot to making adjustments on here. And again, this is not such a hard thing to do. As long as you have this, make sure when you think about mounting these set to your rig that you've got the clearance to get your 1/2" wrenches in there. And if you've done it a couple of times, it's really no big deal to change these. It's pretty quick actually. I mean, it's just a couple of nuts, not a whole lot to it. So that wraps it up, I guess, for our adjustments part of the review. And now we'll get on to actually running the pedals. And I'll do a little voiceover on the video where I ran them. And you can see the bumpers actually moving back and forth in the video. And then we'll do final thoughts. So let's get to the video.